Welcome back, everyone. I'm Maria Judnick, the coordinator of digital initiatives here at the San Jose State Writing Center. And we're continuing on our virtual video craft series with local writers. We're very honored today to be here with Stacey Lee, and she has a new book coming out, The Luck of the Titanic, which I've read, and we'll be talking a little bit about today. So I have some questions for Stacey, and our first question is, you started your career originally as a lawyer. What made you decide to transition from writing briefs to writing books? How has any of your writing craft from your time as a lawyer influenced the way that you write your books now?
Yeah, I started as a lawyer mainly because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I think I followed the pretty typical, I don't know, I grew up in a typical household for Asian Americans. They want you to make sure that you can survive. And so parents often steer their kids to those professionals, careers, lawyer, doctor. In my case, it was medical school. My dad was a doctor, so they really wanted me to be a doctor. And I think I had this reckoning about my senior year in college where I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor. I hate blood. I don't like working on people. I don't like labs. And so I switched to the most logical, I guess, which was going to law school, because I knew I didn't want to be an engineer is basically the reason. But I also knew that there was quite a bit of writing in the legal field, and I had always had the writing bug ever since I was a kid. So I went to law school, and I did that, and I feel like that was something that I could do for my parents because we have a great relationship and I love them and I wanted them to feel happy and comfortable with what their daughter was doing. I did that for a good 10 years before I finally got married and I finally thought to myself, okay, we're going to have kids soon. I want to take a break from being a lawyer and do what I've always loved to do, which is to write. That was something that I'd always done, like I said, as a child, just purely as a hobby, as a therapeutic thing, not because I ever thought I could be a writer for a living. It was just not something that was possible. I mean, you grow up in a world where you go to the library and there's no books by Asian Americans. You don't even think it's possible to do it. So it wasn't really possible in my mind to do that, but I just did it because I really love to do it. So your question is, how did my work as a lawyer help and inform what I do today? I definitely feel that law school teaches you a very succinct style of writing. And in fact, in my legal writing class, we were fined a quarter for every adverb or adjective we used. So it teaches
Whoa.
you to write really tight and really meaningful sentences. And that was key to writing for me because I guess I had written more in a flowery floral style, maybe. I don't know, but I learned to sort of whittle things down to their essence. And then all the adverbs and the adjectives and the ways to flavor your language was very carefully added back in. I feel like, so I always start with sort of bare writing, just getting the points across that I want to get across. And then I will go back and I will figure out how to add personality to it. So now that I've written quite a bit, I'm on, I think it's my fifth book. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't remember. But in my fifth book, it's definitely easier to just sort of write the way that it will be in the final draft, do you know, rather than layering, which is what I had done for the first few books. But I think you just get better at the process. So that's what law school did for my writing. And I think it also taught me a certain discipline about, making sure I was productive and efficient. Of course, that kind of all goes to pot when you have children because you're sort of fitting things around the children's schedule. But yeah.
Now I'm curious. Do you remember the first thing that you wrote after you decided to, take that time for yourself and become a writer?
Well, the first thing I wrote is Under a Painted Sky, which is the first book that was published. At that point in my life, well, okay, back up. I decided I was going to retire, start a family, try to be there full time. But I also knew that this was the time where I could finally do the thing that I wanted to do, which is just to write. And so there was one summer where my kids were very young, and my parents, who live in LA, offered to watch them for the summer. And suddenly I had a whole summer to myself to do whatever I wanted. So we decided to do our floors. Oh my gosh, that's so, banal, but we decided to do the floors. And as anyone who's done floors knows, that you cannot really be in the house. It's so dusty and noisy, and you can't function by living in the house because there's just too much noise. So it displaced me to the library, Santa Clara Library. And I found myself in the middle of the children's section and in the Gold Rush section, which is very busy for the fourth graders, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they learn in fourth grade. So I was sitting there on one of those little tables, and I decided, and I knew I had always wanted to write sort of something about my family's history. Under a Painted Sky isn't about my family, but my family did come over during the 19th century, the late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
Under a Painted Sky takes place in 1849, which is the year of the gold rush.
Right.
So I decided I would start learning about the gold rush a little more, because when I went to fourth grade, we didn't learn about the gold rush. I don't know about
Really?
you, but I feel like my kids learned about it in fourth grade. But back then, that was going way back, we didn't learn about the gold rush. It wasn't like the thing to learn about at that age. So I didn't know a lot about it. So I started learning about it, and that's what eventually became this book. The writing that I had done before that, I guess I was doing it, but I didn't have it in my mind that this is something I could do, because, as I said, that was not something that I grew up with, this notion that Asian Americans could write or even be in books, to be honest. But that summer, I finally thought to myself, I could seriously try to make this happen. I have kids. I was invested in doing something for my kids. And I was in the middle of the gold rush section, and it all sort of made sense to me. So that was the first book I really, really tried to get published. And we had the internet, things became easier to submit to agents, and it was just a lot more accessible at that point in time.
Wow, I'm just so impressed that you started with, I'm going to write that novel, and
Yeah.
as you're sitting there doing the research. That's really impressive. Yeah.
Thanks.
So this sort of relates, I guess, to my next question for you. Because I was reading an interview that you had done with your agent, and you mentioned that you have a really hard time letting go of projects and knowing when the work is done. So yet you were able to, know when that first book was ready to go out into the world. That's just a great skill to have. I also was going to say, I noticed that you mentioned a transformative week at Hedgebrook in your acknowledgments for your latest book, The Luck of the Titanic. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing process now? So you sort of mentioned before when you were adding those adjectives and adverbs back in. Are you someone that works with writing groups? Do you like doing location-specific research? And on top of that, what sort of advice do you have for someone for students looking to work on projects and trying to learn their process?
Sure. I feel like the first part of your question was about knowing when to stop, when a book is done, right? And I feel like the answer to that has changed a lot, just because now I have so many deadlines. I have external deadlines I have to meet. So even if I feel like I could write this book for another few years, I can't. So in a way, I'm sort of, they rip it out of my hands. Before, I feel like I think maybe it comes down to personality type. Like I felt like I was always a perfectionist and it was really hard for me to let things go. But after a while, I think you just need to, because the reality is that you need to be paid and you need to move on to the next book. So for me, that was definitely just a hard reality. Um, and then the Hedgebrook question
Mhm.
was, yeah, very in this wonderful organization, Hedgebrook up in Seattle. It provides a sanctuary for writers. And if anyone ever gets a chance to go up there or apply, they should definitely do it. There are like a handful of cottages, and each writer gets a cottage. And the point is to allow women writers, it's for women only, women writers to really just experience the freedom of not being the one who's not being the one who has to take care of everyone. And I think as women, we're always under this pressure to be the caretakers and to do everything for everyone. So at Hedgebrook, you are the one being taken care of. The meals are provided for you. You know, you don't have to do anything except for write and build your fire. That's the one skill they teach you. And they say you have to build your fire because it's up to you to light and maintain your fire in the world. It's very symbolic. So you have to actually, you don't have to chop the wood, but you have to bring the wood to your fireplace and get that started. And it's like, this is your number one survival skill, build that fire. So yes, I wholeheartedly recommend this wonderful like organization. And if anyone can go there, it's just transformative. And then the last part of your question was, how do I write, and do I use writer groups? And I definitely don't use writer groups because I think, I think I would like to have as I was starting out, but when I started out, I didn't really have a lot of, I don't know, access to. I mean, nowadays it's easy to meet people, and we have
They're everywhere. Yeah.
SWI, right? And they're matching people up, and I think there's like some awesome ways to just connect with people. Back when I was starting, I really did not even know what a critique partner was or did, or that people did that. And so I started out, it was very much a solitary thing. And I think I met a lot of my writerly friends just through the process of, publishing books. I've met a lot of people that way. And I think when you learn to write on your own and you just sort of, maybe that was just the way that I was used to doing it, and so I do use critique partners. I have an excellent critique partner, Stephanie Garber. She is
Hmm.
a writer who writes in the fantasy realm. And we do a lot of exchanging our manuscripts and like development, because we talk on the phone a lot. And I think that's what's really helped my writing. And then I will, if I need to read, I will ask someone in the writerly community and just share with them. But as far as having groups where we're discussing ideas, that part to me, I just really never made time in my life for. And I think, I also think that, back to the family issue, it's just really hard to find the time. I think I would love to have done that as a young writer. I would have loved that. Yeah, so maybe if I was younger, Maria, I don't know.
Well, also, I love to add this in because St. Mary's has, this is for all of the San Jose State fans out here. If you are interested, St. Mary's, one of the local colleges, you've all heard my interview with Leslie Tenorio. He's a professor there and I went there. They do a collaboration with Hedgebrook, and they do a one-day writers retreat for women every
Amazing.
June.
Oh,
So
that's good to know.
if
Yeah.
you would like to participate in this transformative experience that Stacey's talking about, you can go for one day up at St. Mary's.
Oh my gosh. See, there you go. It's all coming together.
It's all right at our fingertips here in the Bay Area.
That's right.
How has being a part of this organization, We Need Diverse Books, how has that influenced you as well? I mean, has that fueled you to want to write further? Or has that changed some of the
Oh,
stories that
yeah.
you've been thinking about and wanting to write about?
Yes, in that, well, the first book was about a Chinese girl and a runaway slave becoming cowboys or disguising themselves as cowboys. So for me, my characters have almost always been Asian American. But what I see has changed is that first book. I don't know if you've seen the hardback cover. I can show it to you. They did not want to put an Asian person on the cover. So you can see that it's a silhouette of these two girls. So, but now you do see Asian people on the cover. And I think it's just really changed how the publishing industry looks at and markets their books. Because I think the thinking was for a long time that books with POC people, POC don't buy books. That was the thinking. In the case of Asians, I think the thinking was they just check them out from the library when they don't buy them. But that Asian people read books clearly, and they buy and they will support books if you have a book that they want to buy. So it's kind of a weird cyclical thing. But I feel like for me, there's been definitely more of I don't know, hopefully more of a demand for the kind of books that I write. I certainly see a lot more authors of color bringing out their work that features characters of color, and not feeling like they have to write a white mainstream character, which is how all my books before Under Painted Sky had a white main character. That was just what we thought we had to do. So having that freedom of moving and writing about the characters we want and putting the people in our worlds that should be there, should realistically be there, that has been very freeing.
And then that historical fact that you mentioned of the 700 survivors, only 6 out of an original 8 were Chinese men. So are there things that, how did you sort of stumble upon this history? Why did you choose to share this story? And then I'm going to give one little spoiler. It's a very mini spoiler, that the twins that are sort of the main characters have an acrobatic background. And since I know you write historical fiction, some of it relates a little bit to your family history, I think. Is there anything in your family history that related to that acrobatic background, or just where did that inspiration come from?
Okay, no, we're not acrobats, unfortunately. I would like to say that we're like acrobats, but we're not. We've just seen when you grow up in the Chinese culture, you're familiar with Chinese acrobats, and we would go see the shows. My parents would take us to see the shows, and always dazzled. This is all before Cirque du Soleil. What they can do is amazing. The feats of balance and precision are just like mind-blowing. Yeah. So that part was just fun to write about and research. But the motion sickness, yeah. I mean, for Under a Painted Sky, there's a lot of cowboys and horses, and I'm like deathly allergic to horses. And I knew that going in, and plus, yeah. So I actually took all this, what do you call it, the allergy meds, Benadryl and stuff like that, just to go to the ranches. There's a local ranch here, which they will show you how to do the lassoing, and they will show you how to, if you want, you can take a horseback ride, but no, I was not going to do that. I can only go so far from my craft, but I did learn to do the lasso, and just being around the farm was like giving me hay fever, and I felt like I was going to die, but the Benadryl sort of knocked me out. So I do suffer from my craft, but I didn't get to go to the Titanic Museum like you. I did not get to go on any large scale ocean liners because of the seasickness. No. But I feel like these subjects still very much fascinate me. It fascinates me to see like cowboys doing their thing. It fascinates me to watch like shipping movies and to the life of the seafaring life is just fascinating to me. So I feel like the conventional wisdom is to write what you know, but I never have believed that. I believe that you should write what you want to know. And I think it keeps your life interesting. And plus, I don't know that much. So I feel like that would be very limiting for me if I just wrote what I knew. So yeah, I like to do the things that I'm interested in.
What sort of led you to think about this story that, the Titanic is a
Oh yeah, the
now,
Titanic
how do
story. Okay.
you
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
sort of gave you the inspiration to write about, did you just find that kernel of a fact about these
Chinese.
Chinese survivors, or what was it that drove that aspect of it?
Well, as with a lot of the things that I end up writing or learning about, my in-laws, my in-laws do just like my parents. They do a lot of traveling, and they're always um, trying to teach us things about our culture that we did not know. And myself, being fourth generation, there's a lot that I just don't know, not having grown up in the mother country or knowing anything much about knowing a lot more about American culture than I do about my Chinese culture. So they're always trying to educate me. And one of the things that they sent me was this Washington Post article about the survivors of the Chinese survivors of the Titanic that nobody knew about. I mean, I feel like people knew about it, but it just was sort of like hidden and just sort of kept quiet. And even the survivors did not tell their families because they were like essentially shamed for surviving. And the newspaper accounts um, just really vilified the Chinese, said that they were hiding on the boats, even though they were just trying to survive like everyone else, right? And
Huh.
I, yeah, so not treated well. In fact, as I say in my author's note, the Chinese were actually turned away at the port. And like everyone else who survived this horrific accident, they could not come into the US. They were put on another boat and shipped to Cuba. So we don't really hear a lot about their stories. And when I learned that there were Chinese people on the Titanic, it just really blew my mind. So of course I had to figure out why and etc. There's a documentary coming out about these men. It
Hmm.
hasn't been released yet, so I have not been able to see it. But from what I know about the the Chinese on there, they were probably um, seamen who
Mhm.
were going to another post in the Caribbean. So that's why they were on the Titanic. They were put on this because they were being, it's called seconded to another location.
What type of research? Because that's always a question that students ask us at the Writing Center. Like, what kind of research do
Mhm.
writers do? Do you spend a lot of time? I know with your first book, you spent a lot of time in the library learning about the gold rush, but for the Titanic, I
Yeah.
mean, were you poring over manuscripts? Were you watching, Kate and Leo a million times? What was
Yeah,
your
I did watch Kate and Leo a lot. That's a great question. I was looking around for my map. I ordered a blueprint of the Titanic. It's about as big as my dining room table, and it's got all the different levels. I always start with the map. I always need to sort of ground myself as to where I am, what am I doing, and I use a microscope. I mean, not a microscope, a magnifying glass, and I just like really poured over the details so I understood the ship. And then there's also this the Titanic Bible, and actually my computer is resting on the two. The two, they're huge, and I use it as a place to put my computer. So whenever I have video interviews, that's what they do now. But I read every page of this tome. There are like two of them, and everyone who writes about the Titanic, I feel like should read them. It gives you all the ins and outs and just very detailed description of
those
the
are from the inquests at the afterwards?
no, the inquest has is uh, you can also read those. They're
I've
available
read those.
online in the newspaper. You did read them. Oh yeah, it's fascinating, right? It's so
Yeah.
interesting to hear. You get sucked into it. I mean, you think, okay, boring witness testimony, but it's fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating to read those accounts. Yeah, so there you go. There's another a resource. And, you know, there's a slew of Titanic movies, not just the Kate and Leo one, but there are all sorts of interesting, I don't know, perspectives on the Titanic. There was one, it was about the building of Titanic, which I watched recently. Did you see that one? It
I,
was.
I will tell you, I've watched so many. I've been fascinated by this since I was a child. I love the Titanic.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that one I thought was quite dramatic and, you know, down to the screw. It was very interesting. So yeah, I think I didn't realize how much fun the research would be. Usually I'm like, okay, it's research time. It's kind of like not my most favorite part. But the research for the Titanic was pretty exciting, pretty fun. I didn't grow up knowing much about the Titanic. The movie, the Kate and Leo movie, was the first time I'd seen anything about the Titanic. So, of course, we were all fascinated after that, right? But yeah, so all the research bits were kind of new to me, new and exciting.
I'm great. All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrap up by thinking this is a question we ask a lot of the writers in this craft series. What advice do you give to a student who's struggling to fall in love with writing? And then also, how might you encourage students who might just first be starting out with writing? How do you get someone excited, or how do you encourage those first writers?
Well, I think it's important to remember that we all are storytellers. We are all storytellers. That's just how we communicate with each other. And so, if you're having a hard time with the writing part, and I understand this because my son just really hates writing, but he's such a good storyteller. Like he'll just sit there and tell me the best stories just orally. So for him, and it was a writer who gave me this advice: just write it down for him. So he'd tell me the stories and I'd start writing some of that down for him. And then I think eventually he figured out that, oh, wow, I actually can build a story. I actually do naturally build a story. Oh, yeah, this is my story. So I feel like the point of that is that everyone just think about the stories you tell your family members or your friends. Oh, this, I was shopping and this guy hit my car, or whatever, the stories that we tell about our days. And it doesn't have to be like huge and dramatic, or it can be very mundane, but there's always like something happened. And then what was the big thing that happened in that story? And then a resolution, right? So all storytelling is like that. You start like a point of interest, and then it grows, and then there's a resolution. Sometimes like a more, you know, obviously our stories have to be a little more complicated than that. There's a lot more, and then this, and then it was fine. But then this, and then it was fine, and then this. So, but starting with that arc is a really great. Just realizing that we all do this, and we all know naturally how to do that.
Well, we thank you so much for taking the time with us today and sharing some of these great insights. I know that our students always love to hear all of these different journeys that our authors have taken in the Bay Area and beyond. So thank you again, Stacey.
You're so welcome.
Sharing
You're
with us.
so welcome. It's been a pleasure.